In this episode of Children of Heroes, we traveled about 2.5 hours west from London to Nailsea, where we talked to Mr. Adrian Píška, son of leading aircraftman Aloise Píška.
Thank you for participating in our project Children of Heroes. Your father served in the Royal Air Force
Yes.
during the Second World War.
Yes.
After the Nazi occupation of Czechoslovakia,
Yes.
he fled the country
Yes.
via the Middle East.
Correct.
What was his journey like?
I've got some maps here which I can show you that take you through that. But before that, I'll just mention a picture. It's a school photograph of my father, aged about 5, and sitting close to him is Josef Bublik, one of the heroes from the Heydrich assassination. They were at school together. He left along this line here, out of Czechoslovakia, through to Budapest, and right down towards Turkey. This was all in the winter of 1939-40. He and some other colleagues determined to escape. So that was the first part of that journey. He goes round to Beirut. He's there with many other Czechs who'd escaped. So from there, having gathered with his colleagues, next one I think will be a picture of my father on top of a camel. Ultimately, they were moved on. He then left Beirut and went to Alexandria. And from there, he went to Libya, and from there up into Marseille. He stayed there for a couple of years and was involved with a mortar regiment in the Battle for France. After the Germans had reneged on the Free French element, he headed off through Spain to Lisbon. From Lisbon, he went by sea round to Gibraltar and then again by sea up to Greenock. This photograph is quite relevant because it's actually one taken in Marseille in 1941-42. And here's the back of that photograph signed off by the local authorities. And it puts his date of birth and a few other bits of detail there.
After the fall of France.
Yes.
And he joined the
Correct.
Royal Air Force.
Yes.
There.
Yeah.
What was his role in the Royal Air Force?
He joined what I think was called the Free Czech Air Force, but it was within the Royal Air Force. And I'm not quite sure of the date of this photograph. The interesting thing is none of these would have been his clothes. They would have all been clothes given to them during their escapes. Because he was a really good linguist, he spoke many languages. In fact, he spoke English a lot better than some English people. And he became a communications controller in the ops room. And he was with 310 Squadron of Spitfires down in Kent, down in Manston. So that was his role from 1942, late 42 to 3. He was trained up, coached, joined his colleagues as a capable aircraftsman and moved on with the Czech Air Force Squadron down in Manston. And that until the end of World War II.
After the war, he returned to Czechoslovakia?
Yes.
With his British wife?
Yes. Interestingly, it seems lots of Czech men married lots of English girls. That's my mother on their wedding day, which was 19th of May 1945. They got married a week after the war ended. And my father was repatriated, or recalled, whichever way you want to look at it, and continued serving in the Czech Air Force in Prague. He was rapidly promoted to captain from what he was previously. And my mother joined him later by way of a Lancaster bomber that had been converted with other English wives flying out to Prague. He continued in service with the Czech Air Force. He was assigned to a flat in Prague, and I understand that was actually, it'd be wrong to say gifted, but it was their flat. And that's the flat in Prague that they owned, so it's a mansion house, so that they owned the flat, I think, that was at the front of that block. In order to escape the second time, he had to re-engineer the interior to provide another entrance. I don't fully understand the scope of that, but they created it so that the police who were doing checks day in, day out would not establish that they'd done a runner.
How did his life change after the communist school in 1948?
Yes. Well, he lost his rank, he lost his job, he lost everything. He was a wanted man, and he would have been in the, if not dead, he would have been in the salt mine somewhere. Stalin was after all of those who'd had any affiliation with the West. Anybody tarnished by the West was out. And having an English wife and my eldest sister Josie was born in 1946 in Prague, and my eldest brother 1948 in Prague, with an English wife. All of this chemistry was really quite challenging. So he determined to escape. He went to several meetings, and I believe my mother went to some as well, regarding how to escape from Czechoslovakia as it was then. He didn't go to the second meeting, and in a way that was a blessing because 4 of the group were shot. I only found that out 3 or 4 days ago. My father made his own plans. He stayed longer, but my mother came out on the pretense of coming home on holiday. She was helped by the Salvation Army to smuggle my sister and brother out. At that time, boys were not allowed to be taken out of the country, but they managed to evade that and come out as a family. My father then escaped later.
What did he do in the UK?
Once he was in the UK, he and my mother went through a lot of challenges. My mother's mother, so that's my maternal grandmother, refused to take them in, and they had to figure out what they were going to do. They lived in a Nissen hut. That's the grandmother, and that's actually me, Paul and Josie and my mother up there. In the background is a Nissen hut, not as in Nissan car, but Nissen. And those were the accommodation blocks for most of the airfields that dotted around the UK, whether it was in Essex or in Kent. And he eventually found work repairing railway lines for a period of time. After that, he joined the local authority, became part of their finance department, and stayed there till the end of his working days.
Did he manage to see the rest of his family?
That was very difficult. The grandparents, he never saw them again. And life at home wasn't easy. It caused challenges in the domestic setting. It also caused him, I guess, a lot of personal anxiety and grief. In my mind and opinion, he never ever reconciled himself to being English. My father reconnected with Czechoslovakia and spent the remaining part of his years, really quite a lot of them, going backwards and forwards and reconnecting with family.
You yourself served in the Royal Navy. What was the main motivation for you?
I ran away from home. Life was quite challenging at home. We had mum, dad, Josie, Paul and myself initially, and then 2 younger sisters, Naomi and Melanie, and mother-in-law, all crammed into a small house. I joined the Navy in 1965 at the age of 15. So I, in the absence of anybody giving me any advice or anything, I developed my own plan. I decided that that was the way forward for me because I would then get clothes that fitted me, I'd get fed, I'd get paid, and I thought, that makes sense to me. So off I went and joined the Navy. I joined HMS Ganges, a huge mast in it, which I've climbed twice. It was the mast at HMS Ganges is 143 feet tall. Sadly, HMS Ganges no longer exists. It's long since gone. I carried on with operational training in other shore establishments in the southwest. Many of those have now disappeared, gone forever. I then joined my first ship, which was an aircraft carrier, HMS Eagle. We went out to Gibraltar, we went to Cape Town. I did the Aden evacuation when we withdrew from there. And I went to Singapore twice. And I did an interview in HMS Terror in Singapore in 1967 for officer selection, which I passed, and I was flown home from there to get the 2 more GCEs that were required.
What are your best memories of your service?
The best job I had was my first command, which was HMS Vigilant in Northern Ireland, where I had, for want of a better description, a shootout with the IRA. That was the high point in many respects. It was a very successful commission. I was in fleet aviation as well, I hasten to add, so I was both occasionally commanding ships and also flying an aircraft. But the high point, I think, would have been HMS Newcastle, my last ship, where I took command of that ship for several ship visits to Belize, to Curacao, amongst other places.
When did you leave the Navy?
The Navy was shrinking. There were no more jobs to be had. There were people redundancy programs, I think. So I thought, well, it's time to go. And I joined a blue chip company. This is what I like doing. My father was a brilliant chef. We all the family cook. I've made sure that my daughter knows how to make knedlíky.
What's your favourite Czech dish?
The problem is that there's only two of us in the house, and most Czech dishes are sizable affairs with sizable outputs. I think the most commonly cooked is Czech dumplings. I always have a freezer full of those, and if not, I go and get some yeast and make some more. The problem here is that, in this country, is that getting the right jam, getting povedla is extremely difficult, true original povedla.
How much do you think your Czech background has influenced your life?
I believe that a lot of my characteristics, my sentiments, my bearing, come directly from my parents, and it's not because of their own behaviour. It's actually inbuilt into us. Actually all my children, their own way. We are very Czech in the way we deal with things. We are very direct. We don't do the English thing by walking quietly away from the party at the end of the day. We say we're going. And when I say we're going to my wife, I say we are going now. And we go. And lots of traits come from my Czech heritage. It's a tricky one, but I live with it.
Is there anything else you would like to add?
I'd like someone to tell me the secret of the goulash that is made by the Women's Institute in Barnov. They always win the prize in Moravia for their annual goulash competition. I've tasted that goulash when I took my father to an event in Barnov, and it is superb. So I haven't got that. But I'm greedy. I'm going to ask for a couple of other things. How on earth does one get proper povedla in this country?